episode 2 of Blitz Sports Online. Tonight we're going to be discussing Premier League team Leicester City and what we expect from them this year, given that they won the league title the previous year. We're also going to be talking about some recent NFL rule changes and how it's impacting the game going forward. My name is Justin Holden, and this is my co-host Gerald Gmroyster.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to cover tonight, and it's going to be a great episode. We also wanted to thank, the people that have been following us since the beginning. I mean, this has been an awesome project to work with some of my best friends, and we hope to continue to give you quality product. But with that, let's get on to the show, and I'll turn the time over to Justin.
Okay, so our first discussion tonight is about Leicester City, a Premier League team in the country of England. Last year, they won the Premier League, and it was a real shock to everybody. They weren't even expected to have an upper table finish when it was all said and done, but they actually won the league title completely out of nowhere and a complete shock. This is an even more impressive achievement when you consider the fact that Leicester City has not maintained its status in the top Premier League of English football. They've actually been relegated to Tier 2 and Tier 3 back in 2009. So to come from Tier 3 of English football in 2009 all the way up to the Premier League and then win a league title in 2016, it's very impressive stuff. Their key players are striker Jamie Vardy and winger Riyad Mahrez. And we want to discuss where we think they're going to finish this year, given their league title finish the previous year. So Gerald, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I'm going to straight up admit to you guys that before we studied this episode, I honestly didn't know much about Premier League. Reading up on them, I actually kind of like them. True underdog, story. They've been held down for a while, but they came back and they won a big one. Unfortunately, they're not doing as good this year, and I'm curious to see if luck is going to strike twice. I don't know. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, I think the smart money is on picking a team not to repeat, particularly when it was a surprise that they even got the league title in the first place. But what I will say for Leicester City is that where they're at right now in the table, at around that 9 to 11 spot, I'm expecting them to finish higher than that. I think they can possibly get close to top 5.
I mean, it's definitely still early, so there's still time. But like I said, personally, I don't see them going back. It'd be cool, the underdog story. Can they do it twice? Does this solidify their place in the Tier 1? I don't know.
I think another thing you look at here when you're analyzing this is just the fact that Premier League has so many top ball clubs from around the world. We look at, say, a club like Manchester United, and they've actually been struggling to start the season. But if you look at the players on their roster, you see a lot of top names like Ibrahimovic. They've got Marcus Rashford, who's a really great young striker that they discovered off their youth squad. And Manchester United isn't the only team you look at. You look at a team like Everton that's near the top of the table right now. They got Romelu Lukaku, who I mentioned in one of our previous videos, had a hat trick in one of the opening games. There's a lot of talent around the league, and so for that reason, it's really hard to predict Leicester City to go against all odds a second year in a row. I don't think they're going to finish in the top 3, but I would not be surprised if they hit that 5 or 6 mark in the league table.
Odds are against them, but who knows?
And now we're going to move along to our second segment of the night, where we're talking about recent rule changes in the NFL and how it's impacted the game.
Commissioner Roger Goodell and team owners have been working together to make rule changes in recent years. We will mention a few and discuss whether the changes are appropriate or not.
Now, as you may recall, 5 years ago, the kickoff was moved from the 30-yard line to the 35-yard line. This rule was implemented due to player safety concerns as it relates to collisions on the kickoff play. Increasing the number of kicks that result in touchbacks would therefore mean less kick returns and less injuries overall.
For the 2016 season, another rule change was made so that touchbacks now result in the ball being placed on the 25-yard line instead of the 20, meaning better field position for the kick return team. In theory, this further phases kick returns out of the game by making it more risky to try returning a kick.
Some other notable recent rule changes include modifying the sudden death overtime rules, further distance on point after a touchdown kick attempts, And now there's a possibility for 2-point defensive conversions, which we actually saw this most recent week in the Browns versus Ravens game, where a Ravens player blocked the point after attempt and returned it for a conversion. So the question we need to ask ourselves now is, do we like any of these rule changes? And overall, are these rule changes as a whole making the game better or worse for the audience and the players?
I will say, I've been watching football for years, most of my life. I've played for many years. I don't know how much safer the player is with these recent rule changes. In fact, now correct me if I'm wrong. You're the brainiac of this show. You know the stats. I feel like there have been more injuries. There have been so many more injuries in the last few years than I remember watching the game when I was in high school, watching the game as a young man. Like, I feel like there have been so many more injuries with all these rule changes. And for kickoffs, for example, it started with the whole, starting with moving the kickoff line up. And if your kicker's Justin Tucker, who can dang near kick a 60-yard field goal consistently, you're touchbacking that kick every single time. So you already know this ball's coming back to the 25. Defense has to start at the 25. I don't necessarily. I think that holds the defense back. I think it puts the defense in a bad position, and I just don't think a lot of these rule changes are even necessary. Like, I understand you have the fears of concussion, so you want to protect against the head. No targeting. Yeah, get that. And that's great. Keep that. You don't want these players being zombies at 50 or even younger than that. You don't want players losing their life due to some brain disease. But I think when you start, taking away from 2-point conversions, when you start moving the kickoff up, when the touchback is now 25 yards, the game gets slower. The game just seems like, well, when are we going to make it flag football, essentially?
It just seems a lot different, and you touched on a few different points here. I'm going to start with the injuries point. Now, I haven't gone out and researched how many injuries happened on average before these rule changes versus now. But if we just look at these first 2 weeks of the NFL season for 2016, Robert Griffin got hurt. Mm-hmm. Josh McCown got hurt. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. So you can already name right off the top of your head 3 quarterbacks that got hurt in the first 2 weeks, even with the rule changes that are supposed to help them.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. And the quarterback position is a position where they've gone to great lengths to protect the player. I remember there was a Ravens game a few years ago, and I don't even remember, I may be off quoting. Terrell Suggs barely touched Tom Brady and got a penalty. But then it's weird because you have games like the season opener with the Carolina Panthers. How many of those hits weren't called? Had it been Tom Brady or somebody, they would have been ejected from the game.
Well, I think another thing that's crazy about the quarterbacks is, when they lose their protection, mm-hmm. or when they're supposed to lose it, was when they take off running. Then they're considered a ball carrier. They're just like anyone else. When they're sitting in the pocket, they basically constructed now this tackle box. You can't hit them below a certain point on their leg or their knee, so you can't go low on the quarterback. You have to get them in between, not at the helmet and not too low. It actually makes it really tough for defensive ends and other players now to hit the quarterback and get a legal hit. But yet, even with these rules, we're still seeing the quarterbacks get hurt at pretty much the same rate. And I think if we look at shift our attention to the kickoffs, the kickoff rules are actually what frustrate me the most, because you're basically phasing out kick returns from the game. And with this most recent rule change of having the touchback at the 25, that gives the return team almost no incentive to attempt returning the kick, because you just feel stupid if you get tackled before the 25-yard line on your kick return. So it's like, why even return it if it gets kicked in the end zone? Just take the knee. Yeah.
I'm going to get 25 yards rather than risk it and make it to the 15. But we're going to go back to the I want to go back to the QB, tackle box. I think that is stupid. Simply put, stupid. I played defensive line. And when you're in the heat of the moment and you get past your offensive lineman and then you're looking for the ball carrier and the quarterback still has the ball, your mindset isn't thinking of this 3-foot imaginary box that you're going to hit the quarterback in. No, I want to lay him out That's my goal as a defensive lineman, as a linebacker, as a blitzing defensive back. Lay that man out. Because honestly, I lie to you not. He has pads on just like me. He has a helmet on just like me. And some of these quarterbacks, the Joe Flacco's, the Ben Roethlisbergers, the Andy Daltons, okay, so most of the AFC North, their quarterbacks are all of sizable guys that are bigger than some defensive linemen. They're as big as some of the linebackers. You know, you have these quarterbacks, they're not all defenseless, and I think at some point you have to say, okay, play the game. Learn how to run. Save yourself. Because if you got that ball in your hands, you're a ball carrier. You're just the same as a running back or wide receiver. Fair game. Now I get it. I will admit, you're coming off a quarterback at a blind side. He can't see. He's not going to be able to see, you know, who's coming for him on his backside. And a back injury, that's a very dangerous injury. But I'm just saying, I think the rules, I think it babyfies the NFL. And I'm not saying this doesn't trickle down to the NCAA. I'm not saying this doesn't trickle down to the high school, to, you know, Little League, where in high school, they've taken away two-a-days. Two-a-days are no longer a thing. When I played high school ball back in 2007 and, between 05 and 07, two-a-days were a way of life. You knew it was coming in the middle of August after doing your summer weight training.
You know, I have to agree. Overall, when we look at these rules, it's kind of like, I think back to that one South Park episode of, like, Sarcastable.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a reason they made that episode, because they're just looking at, like, oh, wow, like, they did some rule changes in the NFL, and they sucked. So they basically made this episode as, like, a parody of what the NFL was doing. I think Roger Goodell and the owners collectively have a lot to blame here for these rule changes. Now, having said all that, though, there actually is one rule change I can think of that I like. It's actually the change in the sudden death overtime.
Yeah.
And the reason I like this is just because, I mean, it sucks if, like, because, you know, it used to be overtime happens, whoever won the coin toss was definitely going to receive, because all you need to do is march up and kick a field goal and it's game over, you won. Now, each team has a chance to score a touchdown to put the game on ice, and just getting a field goal on the first drive isn't enough. So is that one that you like?
I do like that, because there have been many a game I've watched where I'm like, again, as a biased Ravens fan, I have Justin Tucker. As a Ravens fan, I have mixed emotions about the rule, because we can march Justin Tucker down to the 30, 40-yard line, and boom, there's the end of the game most of the time. But then again, if it's the flip side and it's some other team with an elite kicker, well, there's the game. You fought your butt off 4 quarters, get to overtime on a lucky coin toss, and the game's won by a field goal. I think, I do agree with this new rule. I think that it adds more excitement to the game, whereas other rules may take away from it. I think, and again, we're going to go back to the subject of special teams. I've played on special teams, and kickoff return are exciting. As for the player, very exciting. And for a fan, you get a guy like Devin Hester in his prime, you never know what he's going to do with that ball. You don't know.
You talk about Devin Hester. That was actually one of the most interesting seasons, too, watching him return all those kicks and punts for touchdowns. It was nuts. And now you're probably never going to see anything like that.
You may never see that again, no matter who's back there, because most of the time, because the kickoff has been moved up, they're going to kick the ball out. And again, like I said, if I'm a receiver, I want longevity in my career. Why am I going to risk running it out, barely get to the 50-yard line, risk an injury, risk all this stuff? I mean, when I know I can just get 25 yards by taking a knee.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, they're trying to phase the kick returns out of the game. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now they're just like, screw it, we're taking it out altogether. Let's just start everyone at the 25-yard line if they won the coin toss.
And on that note, I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years rugby takes over football, because I honestly I'm going into a different sport on this. You've played rugby. I've always wanted to play rugby, never got an opportunity. But watching rugby, and people can say, oh, it's so much more dangerous, yada, yada, yada. In a sense, you have to be smarter, because you don't have the luxury of pads. I think pads give people this false sense of security, whereas out here there in rugby, you have no pads, virtually. And I think it gives it a sense of more intensity. It gives it a sense of more respect for your body because you're not out there just flying and killing people. Yes, there's some brutal hits in rugby. There are some brutal injuries, but they teach how to tackle a different way. You're tackling the tackle and not so much, oh, I can just fly out here like a caged animal because I got pads on and do whatever the heck I want.
Well, let's bring it back to another point here. I mean, realistically, we can sit here and say we hate these new rules all we want, but do you actually see the fan base, the NFL? Do you see the NFL actually losing fans over this?
Well, I did run a poll on my Twitter, and of course, there weren't that many replies, but 100% of the people said a lot of these rules do take away from the game. And that is something to be said. I can scroll down my Facebook timeline on a Sunday and see people complaining about this penalty and that penalty and this and that. Where it's like there's not so much enjoyment. I mean, of course, Facebook is just a cesspool for people to complain, but honestly, they're complaining about a lot of these rule changes, a lot of dumb penalties that are coming out of it. I mean, the whole tackle, the QB tackle box, that just gets me. I mean, at what point, again, are we just going to throw a flag on the quarterback, take the pads off of him, and just say, here, go out there, buddy?
Yeah, and for me, it's really the kickoff changes that I hate the most out of all of them. Okay, so just to wrap this up, there's two we haven't really touched on yet. One of which is there's now a possibility for 2-point defensive conversions on the point after attempts like we saw last week with the Cleveland Browns and the Ravens, where the Ravens got blocked the kick, returned it for 2. We've also got the fact that the point after attempt itself, if you're kicking it, is backed up now. Yeah. In theory, now they're saying, okay, people might go for 2 more, knowing that the point after attempt's longer and not a chip shot. So what's your thought on those new rule changes?
I think the rules balance each other out. Now, when I first heard the point after, kick attempts, actually I heard that in the offseason, believe it or not, I was like, well, that's stupid. Why are you going to, in a sense, I was like, it's half stupid, half okay. Let's make the kickers earn their money. Because, I mean, you line up the 2-yard line for, the old point after. Boom, it's right in. If you can't make a point after at that short of a distance, you shouldn't be a kicker in the NFL. But you're earning your money at this point. And, there is the chance that they're going to start going for 2. There is the point that that it's going to turn away from just your average, point after field goal. But what else is interesting you brought up was the 2-point defensive conversions for the defense. I love it. As a defender, you don't get many chances to score. These opportunities aren't just flying out there, And if you are going to take these point after kicks and put them at a further distance, if teams are going to start going for 2, make them pay if they mess up. Be held accountable. You can't just, defense gets an interception. That's it. No. Let the defender be able to try to run. Make the offense earn these points.
All right, well, my take is actually that I don't like either of these rules, and I'm actually going to just, I once heard John Gruden talking about this, former coach for the Bucks and now an announcer for the NFL, and he was asked on air essentially what we're discussing right now, like how do you feel about all these new rule changes, and I think in particular they're focusing on the point after attempt. And he said, I don't like it because it just changes the flow of the game. And there was a certain charm to before when you knew, like, okay, my team just scored a touchdown, the extra point is automatic, basically, unless there's some kind of freak thing.
You can take a breather, you can get off the side.
You're like, all right, we got a guaranteed 7, and now it's like, it's not like that. Yeah. And it just throws a new element in the game. It's a new monkey wrench into the game. And it's just, it changes the flow. And I think for the defensive point after attempts, I mean, I don't hate them. I mean, I think it's okay. I can live with the fact they made that rule change, but at the same time, it's it's enough just to deny the team the 2 points. But then to have a chance to get 2 points of your own, it just kind of throws off the flow a little bit for me. Seems more like a thing that should apply to college football and not the NFL.
Well, my theory is if it's going to apply to college, it should apply to the NFL. Most of those kids in college are fighting to get to the NFL. Why switch up the rules on them? And I do think they're. This is a subject for maybe another show. Uniformity in the rules. Last week, 2 defensive backs in the BYU-Utah game got ejected for targeting. Now, I don't think in NFL you can get ejected for targeting, but I do think there should be some uniformity to the rules. I know they're two different organizations, but if one's a feeder system for one, for the other, I mean, switching up the rules on some of these kids, especially if the rules are more lax in one league than the other, might run a chance for problems in the future.
Well, that's a fair point you make, but at the same time, we have to consider that there's plenty of differences between college football and NFL.
Oh,
I mean, you got the only needing 1 foot in bounds as opposed to 2 in the NFL.
That's why I think there needs to be uniformity.
And the overtime's a lot different. I mean, college, they're like taking it from the 20s, seeing who can't score first. Like, it's a lot different. So it's just, for me, I agree with John Gruden. I like the fact that, like, the flow of the game. Okay, my team's got the automatic extra point, unless the kicker really messes up on some freak thing. That was, to me, was more intriguing of just like, and it's not always great when you insert predictability into sports, but in that sense, I actually did like it.
Yeah. I'm going to say it like this. I'm going to put it this way, that when you put those pads on as a young man for the first time, or in high school, or as a boy, whenever you put those pads on for the first time, it's a hardcore sport. There's no way around it. This isn't soccer. This isn't basketball. This isn't tennis. When you put those pads in, you're going pedal to the metal, balls to the walls. And that's just your mindset, And when you start to incorporate a lot of different rules, and a lot of rules where me and him can agree on that they don't make sense, in some cases, kind of takes away from the game as a player. I think about, for example, some two-a-days. I mean, it's something simple, and for people that have never played, it's almost like a rite of passage to go through two-a-days, I think, and my nephew, I worked with him all summer, getting him ready to play his freshman year of high school. He told me that there were no two-a-days, and, I had briefly heard that they got rid of it, but I was like, why? And they were saying kids were getting too tired, or, it was working the kids to death. And I think, well, when they get to the NFL, if they get to the NFL, or if they get to college, how's that going to affect these rule changes? How is taking away from this point and that point? And is it going to make them weaker players? Are they going to be less conditioned to go play? Because I will say, and not to go too long, because I know we have only so much time, at the younger levels, tackling isn't practiced as much. You want people to tackle a quarterback in the right way. You want players to be able to take hits the right way. You want people to be able to play this game in a safe manner, yet they don't practice the way they should to get to that level. And that, honestly, I was reading some posts on Facebook. People predict that football might not be a thing within another 2 decades, where it is right now.
Well, I mean, that's not a prediction I would go along with. I think the NFL is pretty entrenched into at least American society, and they're trying to branch out, doing the games in London and stuff. I do think these rule changes, though, have a lot of people scratching their heads, and we both agree that overall, looking at this, we don't like it. Again, I like what they did with overtime. You like what they did with overtime, and also the defensive conversions. But as a whole, looking at this, the changes have been bad, and I put a lot of blame on Roger Goodell and the league owners collaborating on this. I think they messed up.
Yeah, I think they took an L on this one, 0 for 1 on this one.
Well, that concludes our show for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the discussions we had. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Snapchat. My name is Justin Holden, and this is Gerald Royster.
I want to give a special shout out to my nephew Nick, who plays for the Parkville Knights football team. He's the center there, working from all summer. Hey, buddy, good luck on your game this weekend.